South Africa needs to adopt a policy pathway to facilitate development of sustainable climate-smart agricultural systems in order to meet food security and economic development needs. The program must be governed by farming systems, climate-smart development, policy design, implementation, training, as well as capacity building. The country was hit by a massive drought 2 years ago and has been recovering since. Last year saw a bumper crop harvest, and this year may also see satisfactory results following good rains. How can South Africa cope with climate-smart agriculture? Bonani Nyhodo is an agricultural economist with the Agricultural Marketing Councils, and thank you very much for joining us, sir.
Thank you very much, Colin.
What is climate-smart agriculture?
Colin, I'm not going to give a universally accepted definition, but climate-smart agriculture is an agriculture system that is well adapted to the changes of climate, and whilst the adaptation is done, is ensuring that whatever in terms of the variety of seed is a variety that is tolerant to the existing conditions.
At the moment, we are seeing a variation in terms of the climatic conditions. As I mentioned earlier, that we were hit by a drought, and it was devastating in as far as the agricultural sector is concerned. So right now we've been having a bumper crop harvest. Through these variations, how is it applied?
Thank you, Colin. You know, this climate change has brought us into a situation where we end up with a frequent occurrence of some of these climatic events. And as a result, in the last 15 years or so, the frequency of drought has been the droughts have been coming fairly frequently. And as a result, and you rightly pointed out, that the drought has resulted in a lot of losses, especially on the livestock. And the improvements of the rains in the last year or two has led us to a situation where the situation has improved. But we are not where we would be if we did not get into the drought situation. And the way of dealing with these droughts is that we need to use, in terms of crops, we are supposed to be using crops that are tolerant to some of these. With the frequency of the heat waves in the last year, if you as a farmer are not using a seed variety that is resistant to the heat, you may end up losing the whole crop. But in instances where farmers are using resistant varieties, then you are bound to get something. So what it means is that the farming or agriculture needs to be approached in a way that says the status quo has changed. A number of things that we used to do may not work. And as a result, we need to use agriculture is a science. We need to use the science and technologies that will ensure that as a farmer, you are using the varieties or the breeds of animals.
But the problem now is that even though you have to apply the science, when it comes to finances and losses, there has to be ways of mitigating the problem. Here is a scenario that we spoke about 2 years ago when you were on this show. South Africa is a mass importer of maize, and the price is determined in Canada in dollars. And secondly, you saw how the animals were dying during that time, that the government had to intervene. Now, in terms of mitigation through the crisis management control systems that you have and coping mechanisms of the farmers, how have you improved so far?
The coping mechanisms, and I'm sure the colleagues of the Department of Environmental Affairs would attest to this, that the policy that deals with climate change is out for public consultations now. And what what government is trying to do is to say, in terms of, you need to be long-term on some of these things, is that in terms of what we may end up with, what is it that we need to do now? So it's not an instant, unfortunately, it's not an instant solution that you need to come up. But at the time we met and animals were dying, and we met and at the launch of a program. And at that program, we had said the contribution it was making was that at the heart of the drought, what the program was doing, which is the National Red Meat Development Program, was you get the animals that were struggling on the field, get them into the feeding environment, feed and make sure that they are sold.
Let's address this issue. Is it still slanted in as far as how both black and commercial white farmers are benefiting in the system? Because you had to assist black farmers who were struggling, but commercial farmers were well off in terms of water shortage, vaccination, and even supply that was put aside in case of rainy seasons. Now, at the moment, how are you dealing with this matter? Because black farmers were reluctant to sell their cattle because they wanted to keep them for a long time, but it was being devalued because of the duration which they were kept in. And secondly, when they have to go for auction, they cannot name the price, and they felt discriminated and disadvantaged. Has the department solved this problem to level the playing field so that black farmers should not feel underprivileged?
Yes. Thank you, Colin. Colin, the agriculture environment has a number of commodity associations, and these commodity associations hold annual events. And in these annual events, and the last one I attended was in Port Elizabeth for the wool industry. And in that Congress, there is one thing I appreciated, which is a contribution of organized agriculture that includes both white and black farmers seated in one room, that said the situation has improved. We have received good rains. The likelihood of an outbreak of a Rift Valley fever are high, and the advice that was given to farmers was that farmers, both black and white, need to be vaccinating their animals, and they need to be making orders of the vaccine. So in terms of the movement, it's like with black farmers attending these meetings or congresses, they get the information, first-hand information. The issue of funding is another one, but in the case of wool, and I normally say wool is one of the best examples, where you have a wool from a farmer that is sold on the same platform using the same principles with the wool that will come from the biggest farmer through the wool auctions. So in that environment, you have farmers competing fairly on the same terms within a market, and in terms of advice, given the same advice at the same time. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you very much for making time to speak to us. Unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there.
Thank you very much for having us.
Yeah. That's Bonani Nyhodo, who is an agricultural economist with the Agricultural Marketing Council.